Okay, it's 6, so I will formally kick us off. Hello again, and thank you for joining us. This is the third ever Catherine Project Town Hall, our first in 2022. The project was founded, I think, on the premise that reading great books and grappling with the vital questions that they confront us with is not only a human good, but also one that is best practice, perhaps in community, so with others. And I think that the spaces for that grappling and that the conversation and reading together there are fewer and fewer spaces that allow for that, and it's important that we try to keep those spaces alive. But I think more than that, having a community requires a certain kind of discipline. So doing this together requires certain difficult, sticky human things like disagreement and different differences in the way that we communicate and think about how we go about reading books together. And for all that, there should be ways for us to have open, transparent communication about all of this. So the town hall was instituted as one way that we can do that. We can come together and we can openly air. We can talk about all the good things that are happening, and we can talk about all the ways in which we're trying to spread the love of reading great books with others. And we can talk about ways in which we think that other ways to do that. So I think it's really important that you're here, that so many of you are here, and I just want to say that the forum is as it has been. There's going to be a brief period of remarks by me and Zena, and then it will open it up into a Q&A. The form of Google Meet means that there are some, I think, necessary restrictions to avoid chaos. So during the Q&A, Ashley and I will be manning basically the unmute feature. Or sorry, we won't be manning the unmute feature. We'll allow everyone to unmute, but we ask that everyone stay muted until they're called in the queue. And traditionally, the Q&A period has kind of gone on for as long as people want to hang around, and I'll certainly be there to the end. And as the room thins out, more liberties can be taken. For this initial period, again, we'll just keep everyone muted. This fall, the Catherine Project launched our first core, or we launched our core program. So this is our first attempt at something like a core curriculum. For a long time, the way that the Catherine Project operated was very determined by the enthusiasms and the distinct interests in particular books of our volunteers and Zena and I, but there was never a set list of books that was given some kind of priority in some part of the project. That has changed this fall, and I think that's a big change. And I think there are some very important reasons that we introduced that, and I'll let Zena speak to those reasons. But one that always mattered to me when we were talking about introducing a core curriculum was the idea that if you have a largely online community, a community that is spread out through many different locales, many different backgrounds. There should be some things that we all hold in common, and there should be something like a culture that we're trying to build. And having a core set of texts and a core set of experiences goes a long way towards introducing that commonality. And so the core program is meant to try to introduce something like that into the project, to create a set of questions and texts that many of us have gone through together, sometimes in harrowing fashion. If you've looked at the reading list, like, it's a demanding list. And I think that might be important. That's something we can talk about. But those experiences bond us, and they introduce something that when you run into, say, another Catherineite, maybe you already have in common, that you've read the Iliad, or that you've read this one Flannery O'Connor short story. So as we've tried to introduce commonality, this has also come at a moment where the project has really grown far beyond, I think, where we were at even when we first started thinking about a core curriculum. So just to give a picture of that growth, in 2021 was the first full year that the project existed. We started in the winter of 2020 or the fall of 2020. In 2021, all told, we had about 300 readers in our community, and we organized about 40 courses that year. In 2024, by contrast, we've organized over 160 courses, and we've served over 1,300 readers. Many of those readers take multiple courses. We've offered over 2,100 seats. That's another way to think about it. So the scope of the project is much greater, and I think that is, for me at least, increased a sense of urgency, but also just a positive desire for something, again, to keep us knit together. That's also part of the idea behind trying to organize more in-person events. So in May, we organized this big symposium in New York, done some smaller events elsewhere in the country, and even abroad in the Netherlands. And we'd like to keep that going, because I think the more opportunities we can create for us to congregate in physical space, that introduces another kind of bond, another kind of unity, unifying experience. It's very joyful, especially for me, when I get to participate in these events. It's very joyful to meet you all in person, to actually shake hands, to be able to linger in a room after seminar formally concludes, or to go out for drinks. These are things I cherished about some of my educational experiences, the kind of spontaneous, communal being together, and enthusiasm that goes beyond whatever the formal activity is. So I think in-person events allow for that in a way that sometimes you can generate online, but the medium of Zoom or Google Meet makes it harder. So, I think that should do it for my opening remarks. Do you feel ready, Zena, to speak? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jordan, and welcome everyone. It's hard to see a meeting of this size, and from what I can see, there are some very old friends who've been with us from almost the beginning, and also some people whom I don't know. So there may be people here who this is your first Catherine Project meeting or event. You're here just to learn more about us, and I'm sure there's a huge variety of people that are in between. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for taking your time to hear about us and our project. I want to spend just a little bit of time reinforcing what part of what Jordan said. So Catherine Project began, we're now approaching our 5-year mark. We began in the fall of 2020. So this coming September, it will have been 5 years. And I see us as having fallen into 3 basic phases. And what's interesting to me is not only are these phases sort of developments in an organization, but they've also, in this time, in this sort of dramatic 5-year period where many of us are confronting the role of technology in our lives, confronting the ways that education has deteriorated or changed or how it needs to change. It's also, Catherine Project, I had one thing in mind when I founded it. It's other parts of our world have been revealed in the meantime. So I want to sort of talk a bit about how its stages and what I see now as being the thing which Catherine Project seems best addressed to help with in our current moment. So when I began, we were in COVID, and there was a very obvious problem, which was isolation, which it addressed very immediately because we had free online communities where people could talk about something serious. So they could get off their Netflix, they could get away from something that was screen only, they could take some time away from the screen and read their books, and then they could meet and have real connections with real people. Now, I also suspected at that time that, or I saw, to the extent that a person can see something like this, that our institutions of liberal arts and higher education were in a state of advanced deterioration. They have been for some years now, but that's becoming sort of more and more into the public eye and more into our common attention. And that whatever institutions decide to do to reform, that if there was anything simple that could be done to just keep this practice alive, and it's the simplicity of the practice, the simplicity of the life of the mind that makes Catherine Project possible. So all you need for the life of the mind is a book, a room, and another human being. And that on that principle, we've expanded, we've sort of propped the door open for as many as people to participate in it, share in it, be introduced to it, continue it, whatever phase of study they're at. So that's from the beginning what we've been about. So in our first phase, just to go through the 3 phases of the Catherine Project, first phase was, I think, a pilot, experimental, and it was me and my Twitter account, back when Twitter was Twitter, and it had it worked very well for networking across very wide swathes of population. From the beginning, it was international, to my surprise. I thought we would have people mostly from the US, but from the beginning, we've had people from overseas. That has continued and gone on. So we still draw people from all over the world. We still hear regularly from people in other countries who want to found something like this, but in something which is where there's more offerings in their time zone. From the beginning, the demand far outstripped what we were able to offer. From that first moment when we were looking for 6 Kierkegaard places and ended up having 120 people clamoring on our door wanting to read Kierkegaard on Saturday nights. So the first phase was experimental. The second phase was the beginning of our institutional life, when we received a wonderful grant from Emergent Ventures. We hired Jordan, and we had a regular organization with revenue and with expenses. And from that time, very quickly, thanks to Jordan's hard work, and thanks to all of our incredible volunteers, we were able to start serving pretty close to 500 people a semester. It took a little bit of time to get up to that, but we got up to that point relatively quickly. And that was a kind of steady state that we reached. We had mostly reading groups, some tutorials, and there were 500 people a semester coming to us. And this was on the cost of 1 salary. So the one of the things that's remarkable about the Catherine Project is how many people it reaches for every dollar that's spent on it. That $100,000 grant reached hundreds and hundreds of people. And ever since then, every dollar that goes in reaches a great number of people. So that was our phase for a while. We had, it was all done entirely on a volunteer basis. We offered a huge variety of texts from not just the Western tradition, but also the Eastern traditions, the Near Eastern traditions, the Islamic tradition. And that happened not because of anything that we were promoting, but because of the spontaneous interest of the people that came to us, our volunteers and our readers. We were able, in our second year, to support ourselves just on the basis of individual donations. So that first year of a grant, we quickly made our budget in the second year, just from people like you, just from donations. So that phase, it was clear for some time that we were, had reached a kind of a bottleneck in terms of how many seats we could offer, how many people we could reach, given the resources that we had. And we had talked for some time with our volunteer tutors and with others, with our friends, with our board members, about launching a core program. And thanks to a large, wonderful anonymous donation we received last year at this time, we decided just to do it. So we launched the core curriculum. And since then, the organization has really moved to a different level. So we now are getting close to 1,000 students a semester. We had, I think, Ashley can correct me, 850 applicants for this spring term that's coming up.
Now 940.
Okay, 940. So getting near 1,000 people approaching us every term. And that's in response to our offering that expansion is thanks to our keeping as best grip we can on what we've always done well, our wonderful reading groups and our wonderful volunteers who just like keep the burner, the flame underneath, the various pots cooking on top of it. I don't know I'm going to mess up my metaphor, but anyway, the volunteers who have helped on the reading groups and the readers who come and the readers who give everything they have to it are what's sort of fueling the whole thing. The core curriculum we started with, we ran in this past fall, 23 sections of the first segment, which is called the Life of the Mind seminar. And that seems to be the thing which has pushed us up to the next level. So it's an incredibly exciting time for the project. We are beginning to bring in people who are introduced to a particular set of texts, introduced to a mode of conversation about books, and who can stay with us on a 4-semester course, and then alongside or before entering on to our incredible selections of reading groups. We do this all, and we've done it from the beginning, charging absolutely nothing to our readers. So everything we've offered has been completely free. We've done it without a extensive marketing department. We've done it without the help of, I don't know if any of you are on LinkedIn. One of the worst things about it is the emails. Like we get 3 or 4 emails a day from professionals who want to help us to grow our brand or to do this or to do that. Anyway, we've had many wonderful friends who volunteered to help us in one way or another, but we've never used those kinds of professional services. What we've tried to do is stay close to the desire to learn, which is what made the whole thing work from the beginning and what makes the whole thing grow. To stay close to that and to stay close to the simplicity of our vision, which is that In order to live the life of the mind, all you need are some really good books and some other people and a space to have a conversation. Now, the reason why, let me just go back to something I mentioned earlier. The reason why I think that matters now in a way that I might not have articulated 5 years ago or 10 years ago is that it's increasingly a matter of common awareness that the deep forms of literacy are deteriorating. The institutions that support them are deteriorating. There's less reading for thinking. And along with that, there's less, what everyone's known for some years, there's less community and there's less conversation. And there are fewer spaces for people to gather and talk about something that they care about for its own sake, because it connects to the deepest parts of their humanity. We got an email in the fall, right around the election, expressing, from a longtime reader, expressing their gratitude that they had a space where they could go and think about the deepest questions with a variety of people without being constantly focused into these conversations which are to the moment, and which might matter for one thing or another, but they don't necessarily, if we keep our focus at that level the whole time, we forget that we are connected with people from other cultures, from other times, who have grappled with serious questions, the questions which shape our lives, the questions which shape our imaginations, the questions which shape our futures. And what we want is to keep the door open and to keep making it wider, to let in anyone who wants to be a part of these conversations, anyone who's attracted, whether they're people from the beginning. We have drawn people from all walks of life. We've drawn great books grads who want to keep studying. We've drawn people who are working in the tech sector who are fascinated by the liberal arts and see liberal arts as a source of the future. We've drawn in retirees, people who work in various services, and we want to keep that space open. And because we're now balancing such a large organization, it's just become even more crucial that those of us who support us and those of us who care about our work, that like we rely on you and your help. We cannot do this without support from our friends, from our participants, from our readers, from people who care about what we do. In a way, I've started to get queasy when I think about just our two noble staff managing 1,000 people a semester, and all of the various modes that any serious institution has to go in, and to maintain, most importantly, the spirit of the Catherine Project, which is one of real community, of face-to-face community, of personal connections, of open conversation, in a time when so much is automated, so much is mechanized, and so much is sort of cookie cutter from template. Anyway, I am extremely excited about this phase of the project that we've entered into. I'm thrilled to see all of you, and we'll open up the conversation to any and all questions or comments that you have. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening, and thanks for everything that you've done to help us to get to this point. So, thank you.
I think maybe the ability to rate this, yeah, it's already there. Perfect. Let's see. Granny in San Diego. Sorry, let me make the power to unmute yourself available. I did not do that. A second. Okay, the power has been granted.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to join you. Late to the party, 5 years late, it seems, but I just found out about you in the last 6 months. I had two quick questions. One is, where does the name Catherine, the Catherine Project, come from? Although everybody else probably knows this. And number two is, when do you expect to let people know if their applications have been accepted?
I can answer the first question, and I'll hand over the other to either Jordan or Ashley, whoever would want to answer it. Catherine of Alexandria is the patron saint of philosophers. So she's in some way the original Catherine. But I also took my inspiration from a woman named Catherine Doherty, who was a Catholic activist, spiritual writer in the 20th century, who founded the first national lending library in Canada in a time before the public library system had taken hold. And it was a program based entirely on donations. So people would donate books, they would donate money for postage, and people from all over Canada would write letters requesting books. Catherine and her helpers would put the books in envelopes, put them in the mail. They'd get mailed back when they were finished. And that was the lending library that was nationwide in Canada. It was run by donations, it was run on love, and it was run on that desire to read and to learn, even in the remotest places. So those are the two main Catherines. We take all Catherines. Catherine of Siena, who was never trained to read or write, but wrote some of the most incredible mystical literature. So anyway, that's the story of Catherine. I'll hand it over to the others to let you know about what the schedule for.
So they were the precursor of Netflix DVD lending.
Exactly.
Ashley, you want to introduce yourself and then answer the second question?
Of course. I'm Ashley Cohn. I'm the associate director of the project, and I handle a lot of the enrollment processing as well as part of that position. So we're looking at probably January 17th is the latest you would hear back from us, and with the possibility that you might hear back from us sort of within that week, around then.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Ellen, would you like to go? Ellen Fort? I think you're still muted. Are you unable to mute yourself? I'm sorry, are you unable to unmute yourself, Ellen Fort?
There I go. Aha! I figured it out. I'm not that techy. I am, however, a math person who loves literature, which is hard to come by, I think. And you have finally offered a math reading, and I have been totally baffled by it and loved it, all at the same time. I want to know when we're going to have more math.
So thank you. I'm going to use that, Ellen, that perfect question to say something a bit more about the core curriculum and then to answer your question.
Sure.
So one of the things that we tried to do when we constructed the core curriculum that we have is to break down conventional disciplines, because one of the things that we think has gone wrong in the way that we think about learning is it all becomes information acquisition, and we don't see where thinking and understanding and insight come from. So we read in our Life of the Mind seminar, we have two great mathematicians, I think at least, Ptolemy, the ancient astronomer, and Galileo, not their mathematical writings, but so that you could, we wanted to use texts which get back to foundations where you have a single human being who's not just doing math, but also thinking about what math means, how much math might fit in the bigger picture. Okay, so all to say that it has always been our hope to offer regular groups in mathematics, as well as in sciences, as well as in every form of human discipline for which we can find a class that can be run collaboratively. So we're always on the lookout for people who are willing to lead groups on great texts of mathematics. We have done it before. So we've had Euclid for sure, on and off over the years. And but it's the Dedekind group. Is that the one that you just signed up for?
That's the one I'm in.
Yeah. So we all want more. So it's up to our volunteers, and of course, if anyone in this room, who's, especially if you've been a part of the project and you know us and you want to be more of it, if you want to volunteer, we'd love to hear from you, because we would love to see that as much as you would. So thanks for your enthusiasm, and thanks for joining us on Dedekind. It's a great text.
Ellen Gilbert, would you like to go next?
Hi.
Hi.
I also have a question about the core curriculum. You described it as a shared frame of reference, and I'm wondering whether your hope or your expectation is that everyone will take it eventually.
Our initial hope was this. Our concern for some time has been that if someone comes to the Catherine Project website or our list of offerings because they want to get involved in the life of the mind, what they see is a list of books and authors, and some of which they may have heard of and some of which they may not have. There have been semesters where I'm not confident of who about a third of the people on the list are, and they're often books that I don't know about or haven't heard of. So our original concern was that this was an obstacle to newcomers, and the Catherine Project has always had its major heart for newcomers to the life of the mind. We've always wanted to reach people who didn't have opportunities to do this in any other context. So we wanted to be sure that there was an entryway that was obviously an entryway, and that anyone could step into without having to where it was clear that you didn't have to know a lot in advance. We would love it if people who were involved in the Catherine Project took it, if they all took it at some point, but we don't exert pressure of that kind. I mean, the whole point of Catherine Project in a certain way is that it's a realm of freedom. If people want to come to our reading groups, and they've been coming to our reading groups for years, and they don't want to do the core program, we're happy to have them as they are. But the door is open to anyone who wants to do it. So we, and we'd encourage anyone.
So this won't be a little cabal of people who know the secret handshake.
Oh, I would hope not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's never been.
All right. I guess I just
that's never
wondered
been what
whether
we
it was
wanted.
going to be a divisive thing, whether one has taken it or not.
Oh, that would certainly go counter to its purpose. So
Good. Okay.
it's not meant to be
Okay.
divisive. It's meant to be something that brings people together.
Okay.
And yeah,
Thank you.
And it's also, I can put it this way, there's all the doors are open to Catherine Project. This is just one door we wanted to put out front. You come in through the back door, the side door, the door that's next to the other door, the revolving door, whatever way you want to come in, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Michael Lucetta.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I've been doing the Catherine Project since, I guess last fall. I've really enjoyed doing Aquinas and Aristotle, and those were all really long classes, and which really worked for me because Aquinas and Aristotle are hard going. And I'll just also just want to thank you because I liked it so much. My wife, Christy's now doing Life of the Mind, and our son, John, who's 18, is going to be signed up for 3 classes for the spring,
Oh my gosh.
which he's excited about. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is I noticed in the spring that it seems like the time frame of a lot of the courses has been condensed. And that made me wonder why. And I know that I teach at a community college. And so because of attrition, students dropping out, we've gone to 8-week classes, a lot of our classes, and that makes it in some ways not as good a learning experience because of going through so quick. And so I was a little concerned when I saw that because some books, you don't want to have just like a 4-week class or a 6-week class or an 8-week class. Like I'm in the physics and metaphysics class, and we've been going since last May, and it's just got better and better and better, although a lot of people have dropped out. So I'm just wondering if that's my perception is correct, that you did condense the classes because people were dropping out, and if so, are you concerned that maybe that pace is going to be a little too fast for some of the courses?
So I think I can report this, and Jordan and Ashley can correct me if they're wrong. There was absolutely no intention to condense the schedule. The core classes are fixed at 12 weeks. That's in part because they're for beginners and because we need to give the leaders a finite commitment. So do you see what I'm saying? So we need them to be able to say, okay, I'm committing for 12 weeks. And that's a limitation, but that's only the core program has these limitations. And even then they're just guidelines. So if a group wants to continue past the 12 weeks, it absolutely can. One of the things we were talking about this in a meeting just a few days ago, one of the things that the reading group culture, which was, again, that's just the foundation culture of the Catherine Project. The core project is something that we've built with the resources from that, is just what you're talking about. We want the spontaneity. We want the possibility. We want the freedom for people to teach or to be a part of classes, which are totally unrestrained by any conventional standard. So we don't have classrooms, so we don't pay rent. And our reading groups are all run by volunteers. So if someone wants to read Kierkegaard for 5 years or Plato's Republic in Greek for 5 years, as our David Crane is doing, we want this to be the place where that happens. But for that, we are dependent to some extent on our volunteers. So we can't ask anyone, would you teach a year-long reading group on Aristotle's physics? Like, we can't do that. But what we want to do is to be the space where people come where they can do that. And I find it so encouraging to see that that happened from the very beginning of the project, and it's still happening and may it always go on. So there's nothing deliberate. But we are to some extent vulnerable to what our volunteers or what our other leaders do for us and what they're willing to do. But the 12-week is just for the core program.
I think this is a nice opportunity to elucidate something that we get asked about quite often, which is like how do the course catalogs come together, or how these details all come together. And so Zena's kind of alluded to this, but just to make it super clear, for everything, whether it's in the core curriculum or a general offering, the first thing that happens is we just ask the leaders, when would you like to, what would be the most convenient time for you to lead this group? And what's the time frame? I mean, the core program, as Zena mentioned, those are bounded by, they have this 12-week schedule. Everything else, it's an open question, kind of like, how long, do you want to read the Brothers Karamazov in 16 weeks, or do you want to do it in 12, or, whatever. There are moments where Ashley or I might intervene and say, look, I think this group is a risky proposition. In other words, like, attrition is likely to be very high, but after we've raised that flag, if they want to press on with it, then we'll let that happen. We tend to let that happen. That's one of the reasons why this spring, we started publishing the reading load for each course. So it's roughly this many pages a week, so that people have a sense of, what kind of pace are we talking about, without having to go and do the calculation themselves, like look up the book length.
I can just also add this, that attrition in a conventional university, conventional educational institution is a really big deal. For us, it's part of our life because we don't charge anything, because the door is open, and because everyone who comes to us has a real life. For various reasons, people can't continue. And to the extent that I think we do get concerned about it sometimes, it's more because of the way it affects the group than anything like that. But all that said, we accept it as a part of the way that we need to do things if we want the door to be open in the way that it is. And if we want to be able to have this kind of spontaneous group that can go on for years. I mean, no one can commit to, apart from David Crane, to reading the Republic in Greek over 5 years. It's not something you can do, but we'd love it if it happens.
Thank you.
Taylor.
Hey y'all. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been reading with Catherine Project for like 3 years now, and I have met a lot of great people throughout all the different groups, and a lot of times it's like, in fact, I see some of them I've actually read with here on this call, and it's like I find myself really wanting to be able to read with them again. Or wanting to continue a reading group, like, oh, we finished this, the next logical thing would be to move on to part 2 in whatever sense, right? And like, that feels like a discontinuity right now with Catherine Project. Like, we have these groups, and then like at the very end, there's like this really sad moment where it's like, okay, bye forever. Like, it's like, it's really sad. And so I'm wondering, like, is there any, like, the core of Catherine Project is always going to be bringing together people that are very different to read a work together. But is there ever a vision of some sort of like place, a website, a community where people can find the people that they read with and communicate? We have the Discord, but it's kind of hard to find cohorts or groups that were previously formed.
That's a really interesting question. I was going to mention the Discord, which of course I've never used because I'm too old to use Discord, but that's a really interesting question. And I'm really grateful that you brought it up. Jordan or Ashley, do we have any thoughts? I think probably it's something we would want to think about. And if you have any specific ideas about how that could happen, part of the difficulty is that we want to give people the freedom to disappear if they want to, right? So it would need to be a voluntary place where people could make themselves available to be contacted by other members of Catherine Project. But that, apart from that criterion, I don't know why we couldn't do it if we had the right format. Jordan or Ashley, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we've we've moved towards discouraging the practice of blind copying group participants once they're placed in a group. We've tried to communicate with people who are enrolled in groups that their emails are going to be available to everyone else in the group. So at least with respect to the prospect of continuing groups, my hope is that members of groups still have the ability and the freedom to basically spontaneously continue or propose that, right? So many of us have experienced this. Picking it back up though, which I take it as part of your interest as well, like how do you go back and find it? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I actually haven't thought about that problem. I mean, this is not quite what you're describing, I think, but maybe it could be used, or we could unite these purposes. If you go to something like the Great Books Foundation's website, they have a pretty simple directory. It's just like a spreadsheet essentially that's just all spontaneous groups that people are just throwing together, or they're like, you know, chapters essentially. But like if you want to read great books in Chicago, here's the name and phone number, or the name and email address of the point person there. So I've thought about introducing something like that, where anyone in the Catherine Project, say Taylor, could say, hey, I want to put together this, you know, one of these, what we typically call guerrilla groups. I want to throw together this group where we're going to keep reading Kierkegaard together. This group, we're going to continue reading Kierkegaard. And it's just there on the website. And then people could find you. But that's, I think, to do something more, more dynamic and accessible by all the members of a past group. I'd love to think with you about that, how that could be done, because I know that you have some expertise in this.
Thank you.
Peter.
Hi, thank you so much for hanging out for this Q&A and for the remarks earlier. I just completed my first class with Catherine Project, the Life of the Mind seminar. I loved it. And one of my favorite parts of my cohort was calling back to the previous weeks as the course progressed and kind of making connections from what we were reading to what we had already read. It really created really rich conversations. So I'm not asking you to divulge the secret official thread that bound all of those works together, because I think it's more fun for us to create that on our own. But I would love to know if you want to share or can share the process by which those you select what's going to be read for Life of the Mind or some of the other selections. And I'll mute myself to hear what you have to say, but thank you.
Sure. So I want to say once and for all, there is no secret thread. There are a variety of threads, as anyone will have noticed who's been through it, but there is no secret thread. I think if I had a particular vision of how they fit together, I think I would have to say something about it. That otherwise it would be sort of guess what Zena's thinking, and I don't think that would be a very good pedagogical move. I can tell you this, that the reading list originated in a reading list for a summer program at St. John's for high school students that I went to when I was quite young. So it was my own introduction to the great books, some version of the Life of the Mind seminar, although it was longer. So we read those books, and we also read Jane Austen's Emma and Paradise Lost, and parts of Adam Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments and Nietzsche. And you can't believe anyone ever wrote a syllabus like this, but they did. And they gave it to high school students. So I remembered that. And what I noticed about it in retrospect, and the reason why I wanted to repeat it, was that it was actually going to be something which resisted a clear agenda, a clear formulation, a clear point of view that was being indoctrinated. It was going to cut across genres. It was going to be texts which were from foundational moments where you couldn't say to yourself, oh, this is literature, this is philosophy, this is science, this is math. But where there's a human being doing something thinking about something where they're not committed to any way of doing it. So like Parmenides is like a metaphysician who writes in hexameters, and there's a goddess in there somewhere. So is it philosophy, or is it poetry? Is it mythology? Is it religion? I don't know. Good question. And so that's the idea. That one theme I think that I'd be interested to know any theme anyone noticed. There is maybe a theme about seeing and knowing, and what's the use of seeing? When do our eyes help us? When do they not help us? But that's a pretty broad question, and I think there's a lot of threads that you could draw out of it. So that's the origin of the list. It is also, this is the first semester we've used it. We're going to do something, I think we're going to do it again in the spring. But at that point, there will be a review, and there will be ongoing review. So if anyone has any thoughts that they'd like to share, feel free to write to us about it. Whether they're positive, like never change this, or whether there are things that you think we could do differently, please let us know.
Rick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I have, again, with the core, I have a question. My wife and I did the last session of a rooming meeting. It's Saturday after Thanksgiving. And so there were relatives around. And one of them was quite interested, and she looked at the core later. We weren't there to encourage her, but by phone. But she decided against it. I don't think she had confidence when she tried to read some Parmenides.
Yeah.
Looked at, I majored in philosophy and did some graduate work. I find Parmenides very hard. Anyway, do you have much feedback? I mean, without having a chart or something, just a feeling. How do the people handle? Are they successful? Do they feel successful when they finish this, that they've handled Parmenides? And I guess a related thing, is there much of an attrition rate in these? And
Yeah.
say the first core group.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering about that kind of question.
Well, I can say this, that one of the points of view that I think Catherine Project would like to combat, it's very stubborn and it's hard to combat it. But it's the idea that when you read something, you should be understanding every sentence that you read. And so that reading it is like absorbing information. That's not, there is reading like that, but it's not the deepest kind of reading. And the deepest kind of reading involves confronting an author who's quite different from you, and where sometimes the only thing to do is to find one sentence that you think you might be able to understand and to work out from there. And of course, part of the point too, one of the reasons why the readings in that list are so challenging is that we want people to realize that they can and should and maybe must rely on the other members of the group in order to understand. So it's an act of faith on the part of the reader coming in, that they can, and this is what we would like them to see, and we would like to communicate this better than we do probably. It's hard to communicate it because it is countercultural, but that you can sit down with this text that's 2,000 years old, that's mixing all kinds of genres, that doesn't make a lot of sense on its surface. And you can sit with some other people with goodwill who are in the same situation as you. Because one of the advantages of reading Parmenides is that anyone who shows up and says, like, I got this, let me explain it to you, they're not for real. So you've got to collaborate. You've got to work slowly. You've got to trust the text. So I think that part of me wants to say it's not a bug. It's a feature. You want to be drawn into books which are deeply challenging. And one way to do that is just to throw yourself into the deep end and trust that, like, there's no grades. We're all in it together. None of us understand this stuff. I've been reading classical philosophy since I was 17 years old and was in this high school program where we read a curriculum like that. I got a PhD in it. I've studied it for many years. It happens to me regularly that I come across passages that I cannot understand. Not like every now and then, but regularly. That is my experience. And what happens is not that somehow I don't, it's that I learned to trust and be comfortable in that state of not fully understanding what I'm reading. And that's when all the good stuff happens. So anyway, we need to communicate this better. And we, in a way, it's very hard. In fact, those of you who are still on Twitter, and I don't blame you if you're not, but if you still are, I've been trying to fight this out recently, and it's challenging. People don't like to be put on their back feet, but we're very committed to doing it, and we think that the best kinds of learning come out of that. So I would just encourage your friend, and all of you, if anyone has friends like this, encourage them and let them know that these books aren't for professionals. They're for you. And the only way to really find that out is to try it.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
On the subject of feedback, not all of the Life of the Mind seminars this fall have actually concluded yet. When they do, we will be soliciting a lot of feedback from the participants about their experience. Ashley and I will be. Glenn.
Hi there. I just had a comment regarding the point about setting up a follow-up reading group, a group that I was involved in that ended in November. We on our last call, somebody suggested it, working on another work of the same author, and the group agreed to it, and our reading group leader submitted it to you guys. So that's one way you can do it. Somebody just has to kind of grab the reins. Yeah. Everybody seemed pretty excited about it. So, and the other point is somebody from that group and I are going to read something together later this month. We connected using the email addresses, as you said, from the group email. So I think there's a number of ways. It didn't seem intimidating to me at all. And when I reached out, this other participant was quite happy to see that we were thinking the same way. So, and one last point, I'm, I guess a couple courses in, really enjoying it. I have a economics, math type background, so it's all new to me. So this has been absolutely amazing experience. One thing somebody just asked, what if you don't understand the text or know the text? I'm in the Latin translation of Livy right now, and I had done some Latin on my own, and I didn't bill myself as advanced, but I was accepted. But it's extremely advanced, and some of the people in that reading group have absolutely incredible faculty with Latin. I do not. But it's been wonderful to stay on board as more of a voyeur, I think, and just try to gain some knowledge by osmosis. And they've been very welcoming about it. So, again, if you're willing to grab the bull by the horns, I don't think you should feel intimidated. And certainly nobody has made me feel that way in that Latin course. So, again, thank you very much, and keep up the great work.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Jean.
Hi. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Jean, and I just applied for the first time to the Catherine Project, but I haven't participated yet. But my best friend has, and she's raved about it. My question is, I guess I'm curious, sort of, as someone really new to the project, how you guys think about the community that you're trying to build, and sort of how that factors into who you select for the courses, how that, why the program is free, why that's like such a core component of it. Something that actually slightly deterred me from applying previously is I feel like I'm someone who does have a lot of opportunities to do this kind of reading with friends, and I didn't want to take spots away from other people. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe you guys can decide that. But yeah, I guess I'm curious about that.
I think most of your questions should probably be handled by Ashley or Jordan, who do the enrolling for classes. So I know that I can tell you what, on principle, we wanted it to be open to anybody. And part of it is that there's really two different problems in the education system going on at once. So one is that they're not doing liberal education as much as they used to. And the other is that the places that are doing it are becoming less and less accessible. So part of the idea was just to get liberal learning out into the culture, open to anyone who wants to come, and just make the barrier as open as possible. And we like the kind of community where everyone can join free of cost, and where people support it by donating in accordance with what they've experienced. That holds us accountable, because they're not going to support something that doesn't really mean something to them. And it also gives them a stake in this thing, so that it isn't just, I think a lot of our education institutions have just become too distant. They seem like they're kind of self-sufficient things which have their own agenda. This isn't about our agenda. This is about people who want to learn coming together, and we help you provide the resources to do it. I think we've always wanted to be there for people who were at the beginning. We've also, from the beginning, drawn people who had other resources. So one of the things that surprised me when I first founded the project was that grad students and professors of liberal arts topics would sign up. At the beginning, I was like, no, this isn't for you. You have your own community. And then I started to realize that even people who have those kinds of communities don't necessarily have this kind of intellectual community that's open, free, spontaneous, for its own sake, with all different kinds of people. So we, like, Jordan or Ashley can tell you in the details what they do. In principle, we're open to anyone who's willing and who knows what they're getting into. So the application process is primarily just to make sure that you know what you're getting into. Then what they do beyond that, I think, is tough, but they're happy to tell you more details. I don't know if you guys want to talk more about that, the selection process.
Yeah, I think Ashley should speak to this, but I want to say something more general about it first, which is that the beginning of the Catherine Project, as Zena mentioned, there were a lot of people who already had experience coming. And I think one of the, some people who have been around the Catherine Project for a while may have noticed this. People have commented on it, sometimes in jest. There's like a lot of St. John's College people hanging around, which is like, I think it's great. And I think Zena thinks it's great. St. John's people, though, like, they have kind of like the ideal, in some sense, the ideal like community already in terms of like a seminar, what we're trying to do. So you would think like, oh, this is the prime kind of person who like already has access to whatever it is we're trying to do. And yet I tend to really like having them in the project, and I like to place them in groups. And the reason I like to do that is because I think it actually really helps people who are new to doing this to have some kind of core of people in the group that they enter into who exhibit a kind of confidence and calmness and genuine delight in doing this. So I think it's important to have a mix in most groups of people who are true newcomers or they're new to this in some sense, and then people who actually have some experience. And beyond the St. John's example, one of the things that we do during enrollment is try to make sure that as much as we can, based on the applications that we've received, that there is a mix of veteran or experienced Catherine Project readers in a group along with newcomers, because our hope is that those veteran readers will act as that ballast. So they will help introduce the people. It's not just all falling on, say, the facilitator or the leader of the group to sort of model what we're supposed to do or say something about that. So Ashley, you're welcome to say more about the details here.
Yeah, I guess I might just add, I think what Jordan just articulated captures very well what we try to do when we're sort of processing enrollment, and choosing to actually do enrollment rather than a first come, first serve model is very costly, but it does give us this opportunity to really shape the groups and try to build community through the kind of enrollment process that we go through. The one thing I wanted to add though is I'd say the common factor, no matter the person's community or education level, that serves as a kind of thread throughout the groups is this kind of zeal or love of learning. And that's primarily what we're looking for. Obviously, if we end up with like a handful of professors in one group, we might try to shift them around a little bit, or something like this. Again, try to balance out the group prudentially, but it's that spirited love of learning that we're looking for in the statements of purpose, and that we hope to see in all types of learners. And I think in a really good group, that's the unifying factor.
I'll just add one more thing because I think it connects to some other things that people have asked about. I think it's easy because of the simplicity of the principles of Catherine Project. It's easy to think that the implementation is also simple, but it actually really isn't. So for instance, I was really alarmed last year. I met someone who had heard about the Catherine Project who I hadn't met before. And they're like, oh, it's so hard to get into. And it was like the worst thing I could have heard. And I think what had happened was just that we had gotten a ton of applicants in a time where we didn't have that many seats. So sort of by force of necessity, there had to be a lot of people turned away. And it's the same with, whether things are, we're working with a huge group of people with fluctuating demands and fluctuating capacities. And if you think it looks polished, then thank Jordan and Ashley, write them nice emails and tell them how great they are, because that's their doing. It's really challenging to get every semester a listing out and every semester fill those groups in a way that is going to end up with a good conversation. And we really, we care as much as we could care about making sure that everyone who wants to be there, experienced and inexperienced, can come.
Thank you. That was really helpful, especially the last comment, because I think I wasn't sure whether to interpret the free as like free and so can be exclusive, or free to be inclusive. And I had heard the similar comment about it being really hard to get into. And so that's actually really useful to know.
Oh, no, no, no. It's free to be inclusive. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we'll work on this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We don't always know how things get perceived.
I'll just add one last thing again, because I think it's good to articulate these things periodically. The way that it works when you apply, Jean, you've gone through the process now, and maybe everyone on this call has, there's this ranked preference application. One obvious problem that happens every term is that some groups are just wildly popular, and you can't even predict it always. Like sometimes it's the stuff you'd expect. Sometimes it's a novel that we've never offered before. We had no idea what the existing demand was, and there are 80 applications for 14 seats. So part of the problem is if have applicants actually identified more than one preference, or, and are those preferences also wildly popular? So there are people who come to us every term and they list exactly one course on their application. That course it's just really hard to get into as a course. And then I think they do think that the Catherine Project is really exclusive and kind of impossible to get into. And we try to communicate via email with people if they bother to write to us and say to say that to us. But I just want to be clear, there are a lot of moving pieces given the way that we've chosen to offer the courses, to arrange them for people to identify preferences, and then to try to place as many people as possible, really, in a course of some kind.
It's our founding problem. I mean, what founded, in a way, the Catherine Project as it is, was 120 people wanting to read Kierkegaard when there were 6 seats. Anyway.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
Thanks for your question.
Casey.
Okay, actually kind of related to this. I am one of those veteran readers, and I have some background with academia, like not in a while, but like adjunct professor for pharmacy. Like I'm a STEM person. This has all been great. I don't know if this has already been addressed since I was late joining a meeting. I kind of forgot, but here I am. Have you guys ever considered maybe offering like a baby session, like intro to like facilitating or teaching? Like I'd love to volunteer sometime, but I don't feel I have the background like the great people like John Colleen is awesome, for example. Like I'm not a professor background, but like I have the time, but not like, have you guys considered like maybe a little baby training session or something for this or any of that?
We've been talking about it for quite a long time. We really want to have regular ways that group leaders can be trained. We wouldn't call it baby because there's no baby.
That was the wrong use of word. I mean, like intro to like.
But just like people who want to do it, who have the capacity to do it, but just want to have some practice, have some thought, be in a context where they can ask questions, and we've wanted to do that for a long time. So what we wanted is to try to do something like that in person, and in like a summer program of some kind.
That would be amazing. I guess I'll see you in Maryland or New York to do it.
Well, no, we could be it could be anywhere, but we're geographically, very mobile, but it's just one of the things that has been on our list for things to do, and it may be coming. We're working on it, but when we're going to be able to actually pull it off, we're not sure yet. But I think you're absolutely right, and it's part of what we do want. We would love for people who join us as readers and who have some experience with it to be able to become group leaders. That would be what we wanted. I mean, that's the ideal. So, but we know that it might not be quite enough with just what we're offering right now. So we're working on it.
Mr. Baldwin.
Hi, my computer's on the fritz, so I hope I'm coming through like this.
You are.
Great. Yeah, and thanks for asking that, Casey. I'm stoked to think that maybe leaders and others can confer to talk about ways to facilitate discussions. On this same note, if it's not too proprietary, I have a similar organizational themed question, two, in fact, one about maintenance and another about expansion. And just simply, if I can leave it open-ended, I'd like to know what's next, near term and long term. I mean, is it to, never turn away any readers because we have volunteers, or to go from 500 a term to 1,000 a term, or what's the expansion of the Catherine Project look like?
Well, we just took off a big bite by starting the core program, and we're still digesting. So we don't. I think on our list after that would be a summer program like what Casey's mentioning, which is something we've been thinking about on and off for a long time. But we don't. It hasn't worked for us to set growth targets. We don't have enough control over how many people we have to lead the classes, who we trust, who we think are going to be good. Because I've said this before. I've said this in every town hall, but of course there's new people, so I'll say it again. The whole thing with the Catherine Project, the tension is we're an online community. We could become like an Airbnb type platform where anyone who wants to run a group can run a group and anyone can come. But then you would lose a lot of the quality, and you would lose the community, and you would lose the sense that when you signed up for something, you were going to be pretty sure, it's never guaranteed, but pretty sure that you were going to have a serious conversation that had a particular character, a particular culture. And so we don't want to go that far. But so that's at one end. And then at the other end, we become this like exclusive thing, which other people have asked questions about showing concern, where it's like everyone went to St. John's and we all like belong to the same cult and we have a secret handshake and no one can join if they haven't fit in. So what we want is to be as open as possible while maintaining our character. And we've more or less improvised that. And like I said at the beginning, the core program is the biggest expansion that we've done in a few years. And we want to be sure that we're not burning out the staff, losing our vision, compromising our community, overstretching our resources, we need to adjust to digest that. And once we've done that, we'll have a better sense of where things go from there. We hope, on the one hand, it's overwhelming to grow fast. And in another way, because our basic fact is demand that we can hardly ever completely meet, that's also our reason for being. So as long as there's more people that want to read, we want to be able to be, as long as they want to read with us, we want them to be able to come. And what the limits on that are, I mean, we've done all this, right? We've expanded to this point. We don't do advertising. We've had some press, but not a ton. I've been reluctant to do a ton of outreach for fear that the demand will only increase and we won't be able to admit all the people who want to come. So, this is a delicate thing that we're doing. We try in general to say what we mean and to do what we say we're going to do. And that means not like drawing up big 5-year plan targets that are not going to look like anything in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine with outreach that suddenly the demand multiplies exponentially and there aren't enough volunteers. In my own private way, I've planted a seed, only 2 or 3, but I've thought this is such a great vehicle to, catalyze one's own reading outside of an academic institution. And every time I've suggested that to someone who's inside of the academy, they thought, wow, yeah, that would be a good idea. I don't know if those things have taken off, but yeah, I imagine that there's lots of untapped volunteers who, it doesn't dawn on them that they could expand their private studies by introducing text to a group and presiding over a group of readers. One other question, if I may, and this is about maintenance. Zena, you had said that we depend on the support of those in this meeting and their friends, etc. But is it just these private and somewhat random donations, or when it comes to development, I mean, how does the project sustain itself and the point to it's grown up to now?
I'm going to take a little exception at what you said, random and random donations. What the dream is for this to be like a real grassroots organization that is supported by the people who benefit from it to the extent that they can support it. And we're aware, and in fact, it's important to us that many of the people who join us do not have huge resources to contribute. That's fine. We'd love to see like 80–90% reader donation rate, even if it's like a recurring donation of like $5 every 2 months or something like that. So that's the kind of community that we want to create. And we have a wonderful board who look for donors. We've had some grants from various organizations. We're on the lookout for grants from organizations that want us to be free to do what we're doing, that aren't going to try to shape us in a particular direction that's in line with an agenda. We've been successful. We've never missed our budget. We've raised the money to cover our expenses so far. And we build friendships with people that like our work. And we hope that as more people hear about us and as more people benefit from what we're doing, that in a sort of organic fashion, we'll build up the support to expand in whatever way we need to expand.
Oh, naturally, I'm ecstatic to hear it, and forgive me for my careless choice of words. I think we're also playing around, but I had in mind specifically the donation that made Life of the Mind possible. And yeah, what a nice way to suddenly be able to expand the offerings. But
yeah. So that was it was a anonymous donation, so we could not develop it. We can only keep mentioning it and then thanking the person whoever they make.
Thanks.
I think this is a fair moment to mention something that we don't talk about this a lot. I think sometimes out of a sense of not wanting to feel like we're pressuring anyone, but the just so people know, like the rate of donation amongst our readers right now is something like 25%. So there's a lot of room to grow. Again, and this could be really small contributions, but one of the things I think that it is important, as Zena mentioned earlier, is this idea that readers take a stake in what they're doing. I mean, they do that just by showing up and participating, so don't get me wrong. And I'm very grateful just that people come and they take seriously what it means to be in a reading group, to do the reading, to show up. But even just like signaling with a donation, I do this with St. John's. I already gave them a lot of money to study there, so I don't have a lot of money, so it tends to be a very small donation. But I like to boost the alumni giving rate, so I give a little every year, because I want to signal to the leadership of the college that it matters how they treat the community of people that have learned with them, that like we should be a voice that they care about. So I just want to throw that out there, that like there's room for more readers to take a stake, a modest stake, whatever you value this experience that, it's like we go out and we spend $6 on a latte, how many times, a month. If like participating in an 8-week reading group where you got to have these conversations, I feel like that must be worth it. Unless they're bad conversations. I doubt it. There was something in the chat also that I wanted to address. And because I think it's worth, this could open up a conversation. So Emma, I'm going to respond to what you said, and feel free to unmute and follow up if you're able. But we have not created a form or specifically said to everyone who's participated in a group something about volunteering to lead a reading group. We tend to let volunteers come to us when we've hoped that organically this desire to contribute and also to contribute in that specific way will drive people to us. I think it's very possible that, and Ashley and I are currently thinking about ways to do this better. It's very possible that we're not being open enough about how this is our approach. So maybe we should have a very clear statement about volunteering. But the reason why we tend not to aggressively sort of seek out volunteers or indiscriminately, let's say, just say like to anyone, like, have you considered volunteering to lead a group? One, we think the desire is really important, that come somehow organically from within each person. I think that's going to tend towards there being better facilitators or better candidates in general. But the other thing is that as soon as we have these kinds of conversations, my experience has been these conversations about, I want to do this thing, will you let me do it? Or do you think I'm able to do it? In almost all cases, it's just it becomes a sensitive question. Like, even if you come in thinking like, I could take it or leave it, and I'm offering to volunteer, so like, people still feel, if I have to say no, because I really feel like, I don't think you're ready to do this, or I think you need more experience. A lot of people take it hard, I sense. And I don't want to create lots and lots of those conversations coming from my energy to say like, come volunteer with us. And then people they have the conversation with me or an interview. And then I say, I don't think it's going to work. I feel like that exchange is, over time, enough of those exchanges aren't really probably not healthy for my morale. And I think it might hurt some of the readers' morale as well.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And I think it's a valid point. It's not quite, I don't think I saw it when I suggested it as being quite a fill this out and then you will be volunteering. More of like almost gathering ideas of people, because I don't want to run anything anytime soon. But at some point in the future, an introduction to the Russian novel where you start off with Pushkin's poetry, you go through the short stories, you do Gogol, and then there's a second semester going through like Crime and Punishment. But be incredible. I don't want to do it now, but kind of just having a register of interest, or just even knowing that could be a good structure, even if I'm not the person doing it, could be really useful. So I think it's more of a, would you ever be interested? Would you, like, is it something you're interested in doing anytime soon? And then finally, when you're looking at like developing a series of things to offer, you can be like, oh, actually a Russian lit thing could fit in really well right now. Or you might go, oh, we've already got a Dostoevsky thing, we've got something else, just keep pushing it. I don't think it's active conversations, it's more of like a quiet database.
I think we do have a list, or we have had in the past, a list of suggestions for readers for groups. It's a bit different than what you're saying, because you're talking about things that someone might potentially want to lead. But we do have that list, and we do give it out to the volunteer leaders. Is that right? Or has that fallen off now that we're managing there's just many more people? Has that fallen off? Do we still do that?
No, we still do that. It's the list got really big, so a lot, and it became hard to like. It was unwieldy. So what we started doing, I mean, I still will offer it so people can see like, here's everything that's been requested. But I've also tried to identify patterns very generally. So there's like a condensed list, and it's kind of like, here are some examples of really, and it's not just based on requests. It's also based on the organic demand we see when we list offerings. So like, for example, if we list, Pride and Prejudice, and that group gets 100 applications, then I would add that. I'd say, like, look, there are tons of people who wanted to read this. Last term, we gave 14 of them a chance. There's probably 85 people out there who might still want to read it again, at least. So.
I mean, I can just say this, part of the structure of Great Books World, as I've always known it, is that the problem is never finding good things to read. It's always finding the time and the resources to read whatever there is to read. Like, you're always like on an enormous mountain of which you're only getting a tiny piece. So yeah, I think that's a bit the way that it works. But it's true that the high demand issues need to be addressed. Anyway. Are there more questions?
David Tanner mentioned in the chat that it might be worthwhile to simply state the operating cost per reader. So if you just divide the budget by the number of readers we serve this year, then that would be like about $170. But again, that obscures some variables that might matter, like some readers participate in more than one course. So some readers only ever take one course in a given year. The others are that the core program is, those seats, I think it would be just to say that there's a higher cost associated with them, because we are offering honoraria for the people leading those courses.
Right. So I think it's always worth, like, whatever that number is we came up with last year or 2 years ago that was like $200, $250. It's probably a good one. And it's always worth remembering, first of all, that you're welcome no matter what. But secondly, if $200, $250 is not a large amount of money to you, think about the people who can't pay it. So if pay forward the value of your experience to the next person who doesn't necessarily have the same resources. And we've been blessed with, and we have extremely generous people who've been supporting us from the beginning. But as Jordan mentioned, like, it's only about a quarter of the readers who support us at this point. And I at least would like to see 50%, 60%. I mean, I'd like to see 100%. I'd love it if everyone gave even only $1, if that was what they had. I mean, the original, yeah. So please do, if you've had a good experience, if you love the Catherine Project, please think about the people who would feel the same way, but who haven't been able to get into a course yet, because we don't have quite the resources to offer more. So,
Casey.
Okay, 2 points on this just came up in my head as Zena was talking. Have you considered, like, adding an option, like make a donation to offer another reader a scholarship? Well, not even scholarship, because that's the wrong way. It implies cost, so that's tricky. But I don't know how to word it, but almost put somebody in that mind of a framework, but without making someone feel guilty about this might be what a seat costs or something. And then, go ahead. As related to that, I was just curious about the core mind. I had chosen another group, but are you guys going to try to offer something at the beginning of that again? Or are you still digesting this one before? And I know that one was from a donation. I was just wondering if that was a once in a lifetime thing or what.
Oh no, we are offering Life of the Mind seminar next semester. We'll offer it.
You have to have the first one to do that, like to start another group starting that they've had group one to go on.
Yeah. So that we started the next sequence. So far we just keep offering whatever the next one in the sequence is, and we continue to offer the previous ones. So we're planning to do that. We're counting
I
on
think I'm
our.
confused though. Like I thought, so first I thought like the ones offered this time were like you needed to have had like last fall to keep. I'm not sure how this works. Like if somebody new wanted to come in, like that's offered now. I'm confused. Sorry.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
There's 4 courses in the sequence, and the first one's Life of the Mind seminar. So that's the prerequisite for the second. So last semester we offered just Life of the Mind seminars because we were new. Next semester we're offering Life of the Mind seminars, so for beginners, and Boomer seminars, which is the second sequence.
Okay, so I didn't apply because I was confused. I
mean, no, I'm sorry.
No,
No,
I
no,
have
no.
lots of other great books. Next time, if you guys do it the semester after this one, then I'll look again. Okay.
We'll do it every semester.
Okay.
So it's going to be on the horizon.
Great, that's awesome.
The,
Okay.
the only thing here's language that we've used before, and I'll just use it again just because there's new people here. We've used sometimes the pay it forward language. So one of our inspirations was that there's this, if any of you've been to South Bend, Indiana, there's this coffee shop called the Local Cup where the coffee is free. And you pay for the next person's coffee. And that's the spirit in which we'd like to have it. Like, pay for the next person's coffee. Like, put something in for the next person to have this experience that you've enjoyed. That's not about guilt. I mean, in a way, you don't owe us anything, but if you've had a good experience, pass it on to others.
That's what I was getting at, because I mean, guilt's the wrong word, but I have had great experiences across the board, and like encouraging that. It's like you get actual professors. It's like, oh my gosh, and this is all out there. This is amazing. But yeah.
I mean, Jordan said the other day, and he's normally the humble conservative one, not the show off like me, but I mean, we're the only program that's offering this 4-semester introduction to Life of the Mind for free from leaders that are like vetted and qualified and really good, and that we've really sought out to get really good people who are not just smart and not just people who know books, but who listen well and who try to build conversation. So this is something really unusual that we're doing, and it does need help. So yeah, now I'm starting to sound like like one of those old school telethons. So I'll be quiet and hope there's another question. David Tanner had a question.
Wait, hold on. I just want to say, Casey, we haven't processed all the core applications. You should revise it. If you want to take one of the Life of the Mind seminars, please just send us an email and tell us.
Okay. I know you guys extended the deadline. I'm pretty psyched about because you guys have so many offerings, and I'll probably leave my list as is, but that's good to know that it'll be again. So, but thank you for updating.
Yes. Sorry. David Tanner, go ahead.
So I liked last year when you said that, it would be $170 per person to keep the lights on, because that seemed like, okay, well, this is not like an enormous amount of money. And if I can do it, then I know that I'm self-sufficient, sort of, right? I'm not like a drain on the project. I'm actually, I just felt like, it's honest, right? That's how much it
But
actually
no one's
costs.
a drain. No one's a drain.
No, I know, but I mean, I'm a person who has enough money to be able to contribute $200 a year. That's not a stretch for me, so I can do that, right? And I know that maybe in some ideal world I might be able to contribute more, but at least that's like a good baseline. That's what I thought. The other thing I wanted to mention, this is from a while ago. Taylor Pierre, I think, brought up how do you continue with your groups, and I think this is okay to say, but there are such things as guerrilla groups within the Catherine Project, and it's relatively easy. And Jordan and Ashley are very kind about making it easy for the previous groups that it existed in one form to continue. And really all it takes is just the desire of the participants, because we lost our group leader in the Ferrante reading group, and we continued this the entire year, and we finished the entire quartet, and now we're moving on to other Ferrante books next year. So you can do it, and it's kind of in the spirit of the Catherine Project to do it, I think.
Oh, for sure.
David, just quick comment on that. So like, yeah, Mike, I completely agree. And I've actually been a part of a guerrilla group for like almost 3 years now. And I've run my own as well. But the question that I had was just more around like whether that is like going to become a feature of the Catherine Project, that like it's something that you will be like thinking of as like a part of what it means to be a Catherine Project participant, is that you can continue with the same people over time. You will be connected with them. There's like a community that's being fostered here. And I think that happens organically, and that's great. And like, I want that to continue. Everything about Catherine Project is like people first, right? But I think that it's just like the way I think about the Catherine Project is often think about the people I met. And so it's really sad at the end of those groups when you're just like, okay, bye.
Well, if it becomes an official thing, then it's no longer a guerrilla group, right? You have to call it something else.
But I think the concern, one I foresaw this as a possibility, is that, you know, like most of our groups would just turn into long-running groups with, you know, the same people, and all those leaders would be in those groups, you know, and like we would have a tiny number of new offerings each term. Now, it would be a good to like launch those ships, and I think of that each guerrilla group or each like continuing group in those terms, where I'm like, this is actually part of the good that the Catherine Project is doing. Every intellectual friendship, all of that. And so I'm not exactly jealous of it, but I think we have to be somewhat careful. Like I don't want to say, propose to the group leaders that they should always offer those. I mean, not only because, as Zena mentioned, like it's not something you can really ask a volunteer, you know, like, can you just keep running, or you should, or propose that they keep doing that. But yeah, if it happens organically, it has my full blessing. And I would be interested in exploring ways to like make it easier to get in touch with the people you read with before, and to put a group to get back together or something, or get together for like, you know, a one-off thing, a reunion of sorts.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things about the Catherine Project is the amount of like anti-features it has, where like we're explicitly not doing this because it's not what we're trying to do here. Or like there are like these ways that these communities start to form, and suddenly the whole character has changed, and it's very interesting to see how these things need to be very tightly managed. But yeah, totally understand, Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Zena, we can say something.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to call on the next person.
All I'm going to say is that we treasure this aspect. I mean, the thing that David Tanner brought up, like this is the first semester of the Catherine Project. I brought in a volunteer for a tutorial who I didn't really know very well, and they disappeared after a month, and no one actually told me they disappeared. So it was the worst possible scenario from my point of view. And the readers just kept on going. And eventually they told me, and I tried to fix it, and they're like, no, we're happy just talking about the Odyssey among ourselves. I think that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, like this is how it's supposed to be. You know, I would be sad if we ever lost that.
Yeah, I love. I had a reader in a reading group, and I said, I can't make it, you know, on such and such a week. Are you guys okay with postponing? And they said, well, can't we just meet without you and have a conversation, and then, you know, then pick it up and just have another, you know, stick to the schedule again next week? It's like, of course, go ahead. Here's the Zoom link. Taylor.
Hi, I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the leaders get out of it, or how they come, how you kind of not necessarily choose them, but how they what they get out of it and how they return. You know, like what's the attrition? You know, things like that. Like how do they what's their experience?
Sure. So there's, in a way, at this point, two different kinds of leaders. This is a new thing that came in with the core curriculum. There's our volunteer leaders, which are still the vast bulk, I think, of our group leaders. And then we have leaders who often started out as volunteer leaders, but not always. Sometimes we've recruited them from elsewhere, who are leading the core groups, the core classes, because we wanted the core classes to, we want to have, let me put it this way. That we want, on the one hand, we value the amateur perspective. We like it when people are leading groups who are not experts. But we don't want to get so far away from deep knowledge of the books that we become superficial. So we want to have a source in the community of, we want to have a core group of leaders who have spent time with the books. Maybe that means getting a PhD. Maybe it means writing a master's essay. Maybe it means working for a long time on some particular project. But part of our vision is to make sure that there are some people in the group of leaders who are like that. And what we've done is kept, we have those people that are, we recruit them to the core program, and then they often stay on, or they lead core groups and they lead reading groups, either way. But I can say this, that sometimes, I think every leader would say something different about what they get out of it. Sometimes there are people who have a gift for this kind of thing, and they want to be a part of it, and they want to help out, and they're generous, and so they lead a group for us. Other times, there are people who have been away from the books for a while and have a chance to come back. We have the people who come from academia, I think often they love leading groups for people who want to learn. Academia has this sickness where a lot of times you end up dedicating your life to learning and reading books and teaching it. And the way the institution's set up is that you're sort of force feeding people who don't necessarily know why they're there and don't want to be there. And the institution's not helping you do that. So when you're leading a group for the Catherine Project, everyone who's there wants to be reading it. That's guaranteed. So that means that you have a kind of connection with the love of learning for its own sake, which is in fact the fuel that makes the whole thing work. Anyway, those are just brief comments, but I'm happy if anyone else wants to comment who is a leader, or if there was another part of your question that you wanted to emphasize.
No, thank you. That's really
okay. Thanks.
Also, I just want to mention that as far as attrition is concerned amongst volunteers, so one, it can be hard to know immediately. Like, there's no requirement that when someone becomes vetted as a volunteer or approved to or offer groups, that they do so every term. So circumstances of people's life, their priorities, these things change. A lot of people who have led groups with us are already full-time teachers somewhere else. So their ability to lead a group each term isn't guaranteed. And so that means there are people who sometimes stop leading groups. You wouldn't know that they had withdrawn unless you wrote to them directly, or after a certain period, I check in. So at this point, it's if I haven't seen someone in a year, then I would check in with them. And then if, depending on what comes out of that meeting, then you could say, like, okay, I can count that person solidly as like having stopped leading a group. But a lot of people write back and say, no, I'd like to do this again sometime. It's just I had a kid. It's just been too busy. So I do track these things. Alex.
Thanks. This is my first term with Catherine Project. I did the Life of the Mind seminar, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was wondering, for the core program, how did you decide on a sequence of 4 classes? Why not 3? Why not 7? and why those texts specifically. I understand the first param we already talked about. It's kind of like an assortment of lots of different types of text, many different types of threads. But then there seems to be a clear progression in the remainder of the courses. How did you think about that progression? And then, why not extend it further?
Those are both great questions. As to when I extend it further, we, in a way, I suppose we wanted something that looked digestible. So it's a bit like why we don't suggest to our volunteers, would you like to lead a Kierkegaard group for 2 years or for 4 years or however long Jordan's been leading his Kierkegaard group? We don't ask them that because it's just too much time to bite off all at once. So we wanted to offer, especially right for people that are coming in, here's something that is feasible. 4 semesters, it's not a lot, but it's also not nothing. So you'll have spent some time doing some things. We just started it, so it's possible that as the program develops, we will add things onto it, or we'll modify it in some way. The idea behind the specific sequence that we have now is that, in a way, the Life of the Mind seminar, even though it's structured quite differently from the other ones, it's the same principle, which is you go to the foundations of certain ways of thinking. And the ancient Greek books, so we have Homer and then Plato's Republic and then Aristotle. Right now it's De Anima. I think we're going to try that. So these are 3 very different kinds of texts. They cover a variety of topics, and they're at the foundation of a variety of traditions. So the ancient Greek books, if you go in for something called Western civilization or the Western canon, they're at the beginning of that. They're also taken up into the Jewish tradition, into the Christian tradition, into the Islamic tradition. So the 3 major monotheistic traditions. Because they go into the European tradition, the European national traditions, linguistic traditions, they also go all out into the colonies, into American literature, African American literature, Latin American literature, Anglo-African literature, Anglo-Indian literature, etc. So they're places where if you start there, you're at the roots of quite a lot. Not everything. There's other traditions that they're not at the roots of, the Chinese tradition, the Indian tradition, or various oral cultures. It's not the origins of that, but they're very foundational. And they're from a time before. One of the enemies of learning in the current moment is paradoxically specialization. So as the sciences developed, when they were founded 400 or 500 years ago, the natural sciences and the mathematical sciences, there's this massive explosion. They become more and more specialized. At the beginning, you have someone like Newton or Galileo who are doing everything. They're doing theology, they're doing mathematics, they're doing physics, they're doing cosmology, they're doing metaphysics, they're doing philosophy, they're doing ethics, whatever. They're all over the place. But as time goes on, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and to the point where now trying to intervene in a field involves going into a very, very, very tiny space where it's hard to see out of. So the Greeks are a place where you can get to know the human being who's really started to inquire this way, and get to know a book that lots and lots and lots and lots of other people have read. So part of the idea of the great books is not just that they're individual books, which are worth reading, but that they form a kind of conversation with one another. So Homer writes epics, then Virgil writes epics based on Homer, then Dante writes epics based on Virgil and Homer, and then Milton writes an epic based on Dante and Virgil and Homer. So you have this growth, and there's just something about being there at the beginning. It brings people's minds to life. I mean, they're just incredible books. So that's the idea. It's an incredibly challenging, and we struggled over it for a long time, trying to figure out what kind of core program we could do that would do any kind of justice. Like, what's an introduction to? And this was what we came up with, and we're going to try it out, and we know that it'll be worth doing, and we'll figure out over time whether there's something we could be doing better. Is that a good answer, or do you want to follow up? It's getting late, so you
Yeah,
can...
that's great.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and at this point, if you want to say something else, if anyone wants to say something, don't necessarily have to raise your hand. Just, spontaneously participate.
You guys teach me the secret St. John's handshake that somebody missed. I'm joking. I want one though. You guys should make one.
Okay, it's the 2 fingers come out of the nose this way, like this, and then you kind of raise your eyebrows like that, and then you got it. But don't do it to the wrong person, or really bad things could happen. So be sure you know who you're doing that to.
I heard the hazing was really bad, though. That scandals about that.
Well, you mean like making people read all those really impossible books?
Yeah, it got pretty desperate from what I hear.
That's right. Anyway,
Janet.
Let's talk.
Oh, Janet, you're muted.
Okay. Hi. I just did the Life of the Mind, the first, just the first time I've been involved. And I wonder if you're going to have any options for feedback, where we can just, and question, have you ever considered a group that meets, say, every 2 weeks instead of every week, for a little more time to digest the material? Sometimes it feels a little pinched. And just, I waited too late to ask this, but the sense that we're not supposed to bring in other materials to the books. We're just supposed to focus on this book. And some of my frustration was always, I felt like I needed the context, the historical context, the cultural context for the book we were studying to understand what they were responding to when they were writing. And I felt like I'm not supposed to go out and research anything about it because I'm only supposed to be responding to what I see in this book, kind of cold turkey. So just some thoughts.
Thank you so much for speaking up. Okay. No, I'm getting it.
Should I mute myself?
Maybe. But unmute to come back and respond. So we definitely want feedback. We hadn't done this before, so we'd love to know what you think. And you should also feel free to speak freely now, as you already have begun to. We have offered reading groups that met every other week. The danger, I think, for a core curriculum would be, it might be that people can, once a week is kind of what keeps things on someone's schedule. And it just seems like it's more likely that people can come to every week if it meets every week. If it gets to every other week, it can kind of fall off the table. So we want an experience that's somewhat intensive without being too intensive, like twice a week, but without being too relaxed, like once a month, in which case something interferes in it and it goes away. So that's the idea of once a week. We're aware, and it's a tension even among us, among the community, in which you are included, as to whether there's too much material in the Life of the Mind seminar, and whether the pace should be slowed down. And so that's something we definitely want to hear about if that's been your experience. Let me just say something about the context, because I think that's really a crucial question, and one that I think is challenging for people that aren't used to this way of doing things, which is most people. That we choose the books, especially for something like this, because we're confident that they have within them enough to chew on without context. So we want to, for the way I think about it, just to explain, a book is the product of, especially a book like this, it's the product of a person's mind. And they are trying to communicate with you in the same way that a friend might be trying to communicate with you. And you want to try to understand what they're saying. And they are trying to tell you what they want to communicate to you. So you want to listen and to learn how to listen to them. And it's very, very hard to do. It's the hardest thing in reading, is to learn how to listen like that. But one of the things, so there's different ways of thinking about context, and I think they're all out there. And some of them I think are worthy and good, but maybe are for a different, like after you've spent enough time with a book that you have a sense of how you think the author's talking, then you can pick up something and say, oh, okay, this is, this person is helping me see this, but I don't think they're right about that. But you can't engage with it critically if you haven't learned to hear the person's voice for yourself. The other thing is that there often isn't context. So for instance, Parmenides, the first reading in Life of the Mind seminar. What we have is what we've received in the tradition. We don't have much apart from that. There's some passages from Aristotle where he relates how he understands it. But when we have more of an author and we have Aristotle talking about what he thinks of them, it's not obvious that Aristotle is reading it carefully, or he's not reading it with a particular agenda. So the sources for understanding the past are the books. They're the authors, they're the voices of the past. And it's a different mindset to really try to listen to them, and to not, you're not going to, no one expects to pick up a book like this, especially as you're saying, cold turkey without the context. No one expects to have it somehow all make sense, or to even come away with neat talking points. What we would want you to come away with a question, a sense that this person who you're reading is talking about something that you care about. Not that that's going to happen right away on the first read. Maybe you need to bring that to the class. Something I haven't heard enough, it seems to me, in any of my classes my whole life, is someone coming to class and saying, I'm not sure how what this author is saying connects to anything that I know or understand. Can anyone help me? That's a great question to bring to a class. So that's a beginning. There's obviously a lot more to say. I don't know if you wanted to share more about your experience, or if you wanted to follow.
Not necessarily. I mean, I felt like I started going for a little context when we got to Gulliver's Travels, and just to understand the Enlightenment was going on, or the Age of Reason, or the wars, or it just helped to give me some context. And just the basic structure of the Life of the Mind. I felt like we had, for most of the books, we had 1 week and then they were done. So questions will come up, and then after class, you're thinking of responses like, oh, here's another question, here's another question, here's another question. But we were done. So
right.
I kind of feel like That's why I'm hoping to get into a regular class where we can discuss one author, one book, week after week.
Right. I mean, I think that there's always going to be. Sorry, I think you have to mute. I think there's two different things that can be going on at once, and this is something that I think about in this context because, as I say, from the beginning, there have been conversations, and your point of view has been expressed where we need to go more slowly. But part of it is some people are always going to prefer reading slowly and reading quickly, and you might be one of those people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think that that process where a bunch of questions come up and you don't have time to keep going, that is just what these books are like. They're inexhaustible. They're inexhaustible if you take an entire semester course on just one of them. They're inexhaustible if you take a year course on them. They're inexhaustible if you take a 5-year course on them. And that's part of what we want to convey, so that it's not about coming away with a few things. It's about coming away with a habit of mind. We want people to go back. We would love it if people went back to things they cared about, if they picked up along what we're saying. Like, we'd love to have more opportunities for people to connect outside of the official classes if they want to talk about it. But we leaving hungry is a good thing. Leaving with more that you want to understand and talk about. It's interesting that you say Gulliver's Travels for context, because in a way, of course, that's the book where there's, if you're looking for it, there's tons of it. It's also the one I think that in a way stands best on its own. What's it about? It's about a guy who travels and doesn't seem to learn anything. That's a human question. It's not just about the Enlightenment. It's not just about Ireland in the 18th century. It's a human question. How do we learn when we travel? How do we really see other cultures? How do we see other cultures or places that we visit, or other human beings for that matter, in a way that isn't just a projection of ourselves? Like, I mean, one of the members of my Life of the Mind seminar in the first Gulliver's reading was like, I don't know if this guy's ever left England. I thought that was great. Like, has he ever left England? Perfect question for Gulliver's Travels. So I think I'd encourage you to I mean, it might just be that it's not the style of learning that you're going to get used to, that you're going to resonate with. The slower courses might make a big difference, but consider that one of the things that happens when you don't read for context is that you're forced to read for something that you can connect with, a human question. So instead of holding the book at a distance, you're letting it speak to you like another human being. That's what we're looking for. And it's a new course, and it may well need to be. In fact, I'm sure it needs to be moderated in certain ways. But I would encourage you to seek out that spirit. Really try to hear the author as a voice, like a friend, like a person that you know, and hear what they're trying to say to you. And in those contexts, I think the context can be for just a later time when you've already gotten to know them and you want to know a little more. Anyway, thanks so much I really appreciate your speaking up and being honest. So thank you for your question.
But how do you feel about dictionaries?
I hate dictionaries.
or etymologies. Like, I just want to look up the definitions of names. That's all. Small request.
I'm here for that group. I love nerd stuff like that.
I mean, the
I'm just joking, but I totally agree with the spirit that you're talking about, but it is so tempting.
no, I understand, and it's not as if like, I mean, I love good scholarship. I love a good biography. Like, I love a good footnote. It's not really about my personal taste, but it is about my experience in my own education, where, because I was under pressure to postpone that type of learning until a bit later, I felt that I had an orientation with books that really guided me in my graduate studies, when of course you had to read all the literature and all the context and all the this and all the that. I feel like it's always really helped me to be able to connect with the original voice of the book. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't been at this weird place called St. John's, where we don't really look at context. The other thing is there is a more general point, which I alluded to in talking to Janet, but it's true that often the thing that we're looking for is something that's in the book itself. So the context for Homer, it's Homer. There's not anything else. The dictionary, like the dictionary is made up of people collecting the words that people use. And you can do a little bit of your own type of dictionary work if you pause and think about how a particular word's been used. And then instead of appealing to authority, you can say, well, you know, I've heard this word used this way, or I've heard it used that way. And this word sounds to me like this. And then you're speaking on your own level instead of trusting the dictionary scholar. Every fact comes from somewhere. Every fact has a source. Every fact has a source in a human being's judgment. And one of the things that alarms me about the current situation is that we lose track of that. We lose track of the original judgment, where the fact comes from. We lose the capacity to evaluate whether it's true or false. Often, especially in scholarship on old books, it's really a judgment call that's being made. It's not a fact at all. It's a, I think something like this might be the case. I think the evidence points in this direction. And then that gets transmitted down through the hierarchical academic ranks as a fact. And anyone who loves learning and who likes to read can engage with on a more or less equal level with the people that are making those judgments, and can look into the
Oh no.
and
You
say,
froze.
I did,
Yeah. Anyone can look into those judgments.
and say, I agree or I don't agree. I don't think that's what Homer means. I don't think that's what Socrates is doing. So to the freedom to really build your own relationship with a book and make your own judgments about it.
Hi there, Zena. I wanted to ask you, I was working up the courage to ask you about if you had any other book projects germinating, or if you're working on another book. And then it hit me, I have a great idea about an intensive reading group on your book, Lost in Thought. And you could be an author. Yes, an author visit. And I'd be all in on that. But do you have any books germinating up there?
I had to take a long break from writing. My brain dried up, so I had to let it put some new seeds in and like the rain fall on a little bit, give the fields a rest. Um, but you know, give me a little while longer, and I'll come up with something. But I think you should read the real things, and not, I mean, for Catherine Project, for official Catherine Project, my book will never be a topic. But guerrilla groups, what you do in your own time is your own business. I mean, I write my books. They come out of having spent some time reading these old books, and that's what I'd like to share with you, is that original experience.
Abigail.
Hello, I'm a high school student who has been educating myself with the help of my parents for my whole life, and I discovered the Catherine Project a few months ago and went to the Julius Caesar seminar this fall, and it was fabulous, and I really loved it, and I registered for the spring semester and hopefully get into the Life of the Mind. I'm very excited about that. But I have a personal question that I wanted to ask you, and all the wonderful readers here. I get very overwhelmed because I have like 10 different things that I really, really want to read and I'm very excited about. And it's very hard to try to earnestly read 10 things at once. And I think I kind of divide myself with my own aspirations. So I was wondering if you have any advice on how to pick something and focus on it when you are very excited about a lot of things.
Welcome to my life, Abigail. I'm still like that. I think the only thing, one of the reasons why you want something like the Catherine Project is so you sign up for a group and then you have an assignment and then that's what you read. It's one of the reasons why, you know, I have a teaching job with a fixed reading list, so I have to read what I'm told because otherwise I go off in every direction. So you're still young, you might have time to reform, but I'm just telling you, you can get to a pretty advanced age and it's the same way. And I think it's important to remember, even if you do end up developing more of a discipline, that like this is part of the way the life of the mind is. It's one of the reasons why, just by the way, I don't always go in for the, I mean, we have a core program in Catherine Project. So these are things we think would be good to read. But I myself am not a big fan of the like, you have to read this, you have to read this, you have to read this, you have to read this. Oh, no one's educated if they haven't read this. Because the world of the life of the mind is a world of abundance. And if we're not in touch with that, we're missing something. And I think that that sense of there being so much to read and not enough time is reality. That's the way things are. So, but yes, you do want to actually stop and read one thing at a time. And that's what classes are for, I think. So anyway, well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Lance.
I just want to take an opportunity to say hi to my friend Ashley and to thank you, Zena and Jordan, for what y'all are doing here. I've enjoyed the Life of the Mind seminar this term very much, and I look forward to like a debrief on that, y'all.
I think we will probably not this term because we had to just run enrollment for the next term because of the way things are. But I think we will probably have a special meeting about the Life of the Mind seminar.
I think it would be great.
Sometime next term, and just open the floodgates. Anyone who wants to come and talk about something, you can do that because it needs review, and we'll do that in a variety of ways, in small groups and in large groups. But I think we should have probably a large group about it for sure.
Yeah, showing up in a room with people from all over the world and working the way we did on that stuff, it was great.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Well, we're 20 minutes past the advertised closing time.
We advertised a closing time. We
I
have
did.
our principals.
We gotta
Yeah.
play the song "Closing Time" now.
Yeah.
No, no.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm not closing the meeting, but I think we're at that point where if you want to say
Like
something,
Ferris Bueller, go on, get out.
no, if you speak now or forever hold your peace.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Lance.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. This was great.
Thanks to all of you for coming. It's wonderful.
Thank you.